Next, we're going to divide polynomials divided by a monomial. So like number 20, we have this binomial on top divided by -5, which is a monomial, of course. So we can actually use the distributive property, just like with multiplication. We can separate this and say, okay, well, what's 5y divided by -5? And then -10 divided by -5, right? So this minus I just put right here, right? And so I'm just distributing the -5 to each term, right? To that term and to that term. Okay? And so for this first quotient here, 5 divided, or excuse me, 5 divided by -5 is -1, right? So we have an invisible 1 there, and then I have a y, right? Okay, and I'm going to leave the -1 out. All right, and then I have -10 divided by -5, which is +2. So there's the final answer, -y divided by, or -y plus 2, excuse me. And that's what we get when we divide 5y minus 10 divided by -5. All right, so basically just distribute the monomial denominator to each of the terms in the numerator, right? So let's do the same thing with number 22. So I'm going to take each of these terms, 6y to the 6th, and divide it by 3y squared, -9y to the 4th, divided by 3y squared, and then 12y squared divided by 3y squared. Okay, so I'm going to just take each of these individually. And so 6 divided by 3 here is 2. Y to the 6th divided by y squared, we subtract the exponent. 6 minus 2 is 4. -9, so I'm taking that negative there with the 9, divided by 3 is -3. Y to the 4th divided by y squared is y squared. 4 minus 2 is 2. And subtracting those exponents, right? And then I have 12 divided by 3, which is 4. And then y squared divided by y squared, those cancel out, right? I get y to the 0 or just 1. And so I'm just going to leave that out. Okay, and that's the final answer. All right. So here we have the same type of problem, but just set up a little differently, right? So we can do the same thing. We can distribute, when we're dividing a monomial, we can distribute that to each of the terms in the numerator, right? So I'm going to rewrite this as 4h to the 5th k, so this term here, divided by -2h squared k minus 6h squared k squared, this term here. And then I'm going to put this on the bottom again. All right, and so now we can just take each of these individually and evaluate them. So 4 divided by -2 is -2. Okay, then I'm going to deal with the h's. H to the 5th divided by h squared is h cubed, right? And then these k's cancel out, right? K divided by k is just 1, right? Or k to the 0, which is 1. All right, next I'm going to divide -6 divided by -2. So that gives me +3. Don't forget to put the sign here. Sometimes I see people just bringing numbers down, but in polynomials and forgetting to put the plus or the minus. And so make sure you put the sign there, even if it's a positive, right? So then I have h squared divided by h squared. Those cancel out. And then we have k squared divided by k, which is k to the 2 minus that invisible 1 there. That equals 1, right? And I don't have to put this invisible 1 because k to the 1st is just k. All right. So that's how we do, that's how we divide a polynomial divided by a monomial, right? So let's do one more example here. And before I start this last one, let me just introduce some terminology that I meant to introduce sooner. But when you're dividing, the first term is called the dividend. the term that you're dividing by is called the divisor, and the answer that we get is called the quotient, right? All right, so that's just some terms when you divide numbers or polynomials or monomials. What you have on top, or what you're dividing, is the dividend. What you're dividing by is the divisor, and then the quotient is the answer that you get, right? Which we've heard that term before. All right, so number 70, I'm going to set this up the same way. So I'm going to distribute this divisor by each of the terms in the dividend, right? So we can kind of use that language to, instead of saying, oh, the first term, or, we have some terminology that we can use now. So, so I'm just taking each term and putting the divisor on the bottom, right? And so now we're just going to evaluate each of these individual division problems here, right? So I have -9 divided by -3, that's +3. X cubed divided by x to the first is going to be x, and then we subtract 3 minus 1 and we get 2, so it's x squared. Then we have 3 divided by -3, which is -1, so it's minus, and then the 1 can be invisible because we're going to have an x there, right? If there wasn't anything else, we'd need to put the 1, but since there's going to be an x there, I'm just going to leave it invisible, the 1 invisible, and I'll put the x there, and then 2 minus 1 is 1, right? So that's also an invisible 1. So I'm just going to put minus x. And then here we have -15 divided by -3. That's going to be +5, so I'm going to put +5. And then x divided by x cancels out to 1, so I'm not going to put that because we already have the 5 there. All right, so that's our final answer.